capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I know.
Really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. Tonight I have Trisha on the show. Hey, Trish, how's it going?
Going good. How about you?
Not too bad. It's like the first official day of spring for us. I finally got to do some planting for my landscaping job. So I planted these two like huge 4-foot round concrete planters, just like full of like it looks like a Skittles monster threw up over everything. There's so much color.
Oh yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. Actually, get my hand in the dirt. And hey, James, how you doing tonight?
Hi,
Good
James.
to see you. Anything new with you?
Not that I can think of, other than we've been continuing to plow through the stuff for the rebranding over at For We Are Many, and
Nice.
so I'm excited to show off some of that stuff.
I can't wait to see it. It's been a few weeks now in the making, so I'm going to be really excited to see what you guys come up with. All right, so tonight we are covering the final chapter. We've finally made it. It's been this entire year plus like a couple more months. It's been like 6 months we've been going through this book. It's a good and long one, but we're finally at the end of what is communist anarchism, also known as the ABC of anarchism, also known as now and after, or here and afterward. It's got a bunch of titles for whatever reason. It's been published in different places under different names, but it's all the same book. It's a very introductory primer to anarchism, and now we're coming to the final chapter, which is called Defending the Revolution. So, without further ado, James, you say you're multitasking, working on the truck, but couldn't not try to tune in. Oh, well, good. I'm glad you can at least tune in from a distance.
Right.
We'll make it interesting for you. So tonight we are going to learn about defending the revolution, and we will start right now. This is a relatively short chapter, so we should make it through no problem. But it is the final chapter, so he may have packed a lot into it. I have not read this ahead of time, so we'll see. But here we go. As always, we are using Audible Anarchist, and as usual, I will also post a link to this particular episode in the chat in case you want to go back yourself and re-listen to it. There's the option to do that. And now we'll get started.
This audio production was made in collaboration with Audible Anarchist.
Chapter 31. Defense of the Revolution. Suppose your system is tried. Would it have any means of defending the revolution, you ask?
Kind of an important
Certainly.
question.
Even by armed force? Yes, if necessary. But armed force is organized violence. Didn't you say anarchism was against it? Anarchism is opposed to any interference with your liberty, be it by force and violence or by any other means. It is against all invasion and compulsion. But if anyone attacks you, then it is he who is invading you, he who is employing violence against you. You have a right to co-defend yourself. More than that, it is your duty as an anarchist to protect your liberty, to resist coercion and compulsion. Otherwise, you are a slave, not a free man.
So there is one strain of anarchism, and it's I don't know the way I think it's usually conceived of as anarcho-pacifism. And so they would be opposed to what Berkman is saying right now. They do believe in passive resistance, like not complying with people when they give evil orders or try to coerce you to do things you don't want to do in virtually any case. But Berkman here is saying that you gotta stick up for yourself, and you have to preserve the revolution. If that means by force, then so be it. And I would tend to side with Berkman on this one. We can't, especially when you're facing groups like fascists or any sort of group of people that really is not going to care and has, thinking back to just the other night with the conquistadors who just on a whim would murder people and slaughter entire villages and committed an entire genocide, like complete and full genocide of several peoples. Pacifism is not going to stand up to that, unfortunately. At some point, evil, if you even want to call it evil, but whatever it is, raw psychopathy has to be confronted and opposed.
Right. You might not always have the privilege of being able to stand by idly while violence is happening. Sometimes you have to actually make use of some violence in order to put a stop to the violence being done to you or others around you.
Right.
You can't just sit by and watch as the people around you are slaughtered,
Absolutely.
or sit there and let them slaughter you.
Yeah.
You know, that ethical right to not be harmed extends to your right to use as much violence as is necessary to put a stop to the violence being done to you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's basically the entire philosophy of say Antifa is the idea that we can't just sit around and let people be bullied and oppressed. That is the greater evil in the situation than sometimes using force to oppose that. And so we got to do what we got to do. All right. Moving on.
In other words, the social revolution will attack no one, but it will defend itself against invasion from any quarter. Besides, you must not confuse the social revolution with anarchy. Revolution, in some of its stages, is a violent upheaval. Anarchy is a social condition of freedom and peace. The revolution is the means of bringing anarchy about, but it is not anarchy itself. It is to pave the road to anarchy, to establish conditions which will make a life of liberty possible. But to achieve its purpose, the revolution must be imbued with and directed by the anarchist spirit and ideas. The end shapes the means, just as the tool you use must be fit for the work you want to accomplish. That is to say, the social revolution must be anarchistic in method as in aim. Revolutionary defense must be in consonance with this spirit. Self-defense excludes all forms of coercion, of persecution or revenge. It is concerned only with repelling attacks and depriving the enemy of the opportunity to invade you. How would you repel foreign invasion? By strength of the revolution. In what does that strength consist? First and foremost, in the support of the people, in the devotion of the industrial and agricultural masses. If they feel they themselves are making the revolution, that they have become masters of their lives, that they have gained freedom and are building up their welfare, then in that very sentiment, you have the greatest strength of the revolution. The masses fight today for king and capitalist or president because they believe him worth fighting for. Let them believe in the revolution, and they will defend it to the death.
Okay, so that's a pretty similar sentiment to what Peter Kropotkin laid out in the Conquest of Bread. He was basically saying that if you liberate people, if you truly liberate them, if you're fulfilling the promises of the revolution, which in his eyes was the revolution. Revolution was not just toppling of the current order, it was fulfilling the promises. Everyone has their basic needs met. We start setting up mutual aid networks. We organize society as horizontally as possible, so on and so forth. And his idea was once you got to that point, no one is going to give that up willingly. Once you have a taste of true freedom, like real freedom for the first time in your life, real agency, real power over your own destiny, which so many people to this day do not have. We had learned in, I don't remember which episode it was, but I've talked before about how half of this country could not rent a apartment on the wage that they make alone. Half of this country could not live alone and have an apartment anywhere in the United States. It's not enough money for that to be a possibility.
Nope.
So that, I mean, that's a way of shackling you. Partly it seems to be by design, so that there's always workers that are just hungry enough and just desperate enough that they have to accept really crappy jobs that don't give them much, which enriches the richest of people. But the idea of liberating those people, that's how you protect the revolution, because then if someone rises up against you, you have a ready and willing force who's like, well, yeah, of course, I'm living better than I ever have. I'm not going back to the way things were. It would be like at the end of slavery in many ways, when chattel slavery ended. Finally, there's a collective sigh of relief from this hundreds of years of pressure and oppression and abject brutality. Had someone come back and say, oh, we're just going to do slavery again, there would have been a lot of people that would have just taken up arms right then and there.
It's one of those things that you can see even in areas that have at least had some socialist reforms happen, like in Canada with their universal health care. I remember seeing an interview of a Canadian guy who is very much one of their conservatives, a right winger, and he was saying, hell no, we would never give up our universal health care now that we have that. Like, no, not only does this save everyone money versus having a privatized healthcare system, but
Mm-hmm.
we thoroughly enjoy the fact that if somebody comes here on vacation, if they get in an accident or something like that, that they can get taken care of too.
Yeah.
Like, we see this as a necessity. So, it just goes to show that, even though they haven't had a revolution like what is needed, simply because they've implemented some of these things that we discuss needing to implement, they're holding strong to that stuff and going, no, we're not ever going to go back on that. We're keeping universal health care. I see that applying across the board to all these other benefits that we were talking about, to having this revolution and actually changing the way things work and making sure that all of the necessities for life are guaranteed.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head there. That's a fantastic example, that of universal healthcare. I don't think there's been a single country that once they've attained universal healthcare has ever gone back on that.
Right. None of them are interested in it.
Right, because once people have a taste of that, then you're literally threatening their life if you want to go back to a system like we have right now, a privatized system. So yeah, very good example. I like that a lot.
There's, if memory serves right, 33 countries that are considered, first world as far as their level of development, and 32 of them have universal fucking health care.
Guess who
We're
the
the
one
only
is?
ones that don't.
Oh, we're the embarrassment of the world in so many ways.
Fucking laughing stock. They're just like, what are you doing? You have the most fucking abundance of wealth, and you're not even making sure some simple basics like this are taken care of.
Yeah.
It's
And we
embarrassing.
and we spend the most on healthcare.
Uh-huh.
And once you realize that the reason for that is because you need an entire army of people to process claims, deny claims, fight legal battles about claims, all that stuff. Well, of course we spend the most on it. And when our government won't use its power to impose better drug prices, um, or any of these things, uh, when we're so litigious about patents for medicine and that sort of thing. Of course, we spend the most on healthcare. It just doesn't get us the most. But I think
No,
that's
it gives us TV commercials for the drugs they're making
right.
to try to tell you how to self-diagnose and tell your
Oh
doctor.
God, yeah,
I
yeah.
need
Tell your doctor, I need this pill right now. But yeah, but yeah. I mean, in a certain way, it's little wonder that Americans are afraid of a universal healthcare system because they see how much we pay for this private one and they assume it would be the same thing. But no, we'd be cutting out all the bullshit, cutting out all that bureaucracy, all that, well, maybe, but oh, I don't know, or little caveats. We'd be cutting out co-pays, cutting out all this stuff. Like,
hmm I mean, I would have to look up the numbers to see. I don't remember exactly what they had said, but there was analysts who literally broken down everything that we currently spend versus what we would spend under universal health care, and it was astronomically fucking cheaper to go universal.
of course, of course, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. There's absolutely no good argument against it. The number one thing that they throw up is like, oh, well, then the government gets to decide your health care for you. Do you think I want some private company, some giant company that clearly doesn't give a fuck about me deciding my health care? Do you think I want my work to decide what doctors I get to see? How is this a
Right.
better system?
Right. It's not. It's not. And the government doesn't decide who your doctor is. If we went under universal health care, then all doctors would become part of that system and you would just choose which one you want to fucking go to. It would cut out the need for shit like where you have to get pre-approval to go get certain testing or whatnot done. It would cut out all of that middle ground bullshit and make it more accessible. Not to mention, it would cut out the bullshit that a lot of these privatized insurance companies like to do of, oh, well, after you've dropped 15,000 out of your pocket this year,
Right.
then we'll start covering your medical care. What?
Yeah, right.
What?
Absolutely.
On top of the hundreds a month they're going to charge you per person.
Yep. Insurance is just a scam. And it's all insurance too. We got in a car accident about a month ago now. Um, it was just some front end damage. We weren't hurt or anything like that. But it ended up being $8,000. And we have full coverage, which should mean something. But because of this or that or the other thing, we still have to pay our it's not a they don't call it a copay, but
Deductible.
our deductible. We have to pay our deductible still, which is $500. And it's like,
Mhm.
and they wanted to charge us like 400. They wanted to put us $400 down to get a car rental in the meantime. So luckily, my parents just happen to have a car that they're not using, so we've been borrowing that. But it's the same whether it's auto insurance or human insurance. It's just a racket. They can make you pay even when it's not your fault, even when it's things that you need to keep on living, whether that's a car to get to work or whether that's a body to keep on functioning as it's supposed to. They can make you keep on paying.
That sucks too, because like there used to be, coverage for, a rental vehicle that your insurance would pay for it, or like the shop itself would provide you with one, especially
Yeah.
if you were going to a dealership, they would just give you one of the cars off the lot to use as a rental vehicle for the week. And people have stopped doing that, and I don't fucking know why. It's ridiculous. Um,
It's just because they can, because one more way they can squeeze us.
well,
I don't know.
me it's just good customer service that when you're getting paid $100 an hour or more to repair somebody's vehicle, give them one off the fucking lot to use while you're doing it, you know?
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, we're paying $170 for our car insurance every month, and my wife Amanda's had it for like 20 years. That's 20 years of well, I mean, she wasn't paying that much when it was just her, but still,
Right.
that's like I'm sure it's tens of thousands of dollars once you add it all up. and they can't give us a measly little car for a few weeks. Like,
Right.
it's absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
But
No, why would they do that when they could get another like 500 to 600 a week out of you for renting the car?
right,
Fucking fools. Capitalism. God damn it. Hi,
yeah,
Natalie.
it sucks. Yeah, well, hi Natalie, good to see you. How you doing tonight?
We're just
Okay,
bitching because capitalism sucks.
sucks. It
Fucks
sucks.
everything
It's a
up.
terrible system that people defend for some reason. Uh,
Ah.
uh, and
But as he was saying, let them defend the revolution instead. When
right.
they see how much better it is.
I mean, not to go out too far off on a tangent, but have you noticed just the legion of Elon Musk? I can't say the S word because that's banned on Twitch, but um, cheerleaders that have appeared in like the last week and just will not hear a single bad word about him on any platform.
Right? They're trying to call him the most successful self-made entrepreneur ever. And it's like,
Self-made,
self-made my ass. This guy
self-made.
comes from old money because his dad's side of the family owned emerald mines, and his mom has been a fucking top model since she was like 15, bro. And they're wealthy.
Yeah.
He was born into wealth. It helps if you're winning the birth lottery right off the bat, that your family's going to give you fucking seed money to go and start all your own businesses.
Absolutely.
Like, self-made my
Well,
ass.
it's the same with every one of these guys. You know, Jeff Bezos got seed money from a bunch of wealthy friends. Bill Gates got money, I think, from his parents. And they're like, oh, he started in his basement. Well, he also had a house, you know, so
Right.
it's not as though he was on the street, collecting circuit boards that he could find in the dumpster or something like that. Like he started from a platform.
Right.
Every single one. I even had a troll in here one time, and he's like, "Oh, what about?" I think it was Andrew Carnegie. He was trying to defend, or one of those robber barons. He was like, "He was the richest man who who ever lived." Excuse me. And he was, self-made. And like I just went back and forth. I'm like, no, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. He made his money through his work. There's all this stuff. And finally, I got so mad that I went and looked up his Wikipedia, and lo and behold, he got half the money to start his first business from his father. So
Yeah.
it's a complete myth throughout history. There's no such thing as the self-made person. At the very least, even if you save up your own money to start a small business and you build it from there, at some point you're relying on the money that's coming in through the effort of your workers to line your own pockets. So how is that self-made? That's your workers making you.
Right. The only way to not be doing that is if you make it owner operated co-op right off the fucking bat, where you're paying them just as much
Right.
as you're paying yourself,
Sure.
and there's no hierarchy there. Otherwise, you're exploiting their fucking labor.
Sure. If a bunch of people come together and form a worker-owned cooperative and it's truly democratic and they democratically decide on how to split up the profits and then somehow they all become millionaires, okay, at that point I'll start believing in the myth of the self-made millionaire.
Yeah.
But I ain't seen that happen yet.
Right. Only way to get there is if you're skimming money off the top of what the other people around you are producing.
And there it is. Yep. Absolutely true. All right, let's get back on track and back into the book.
Absolutely.
They will fight for the revolution with heart and soul, as the half-starved working men and women and even children of Petrograd defended their city, almost with their bare hands, against the white army of General Yudenich. Take that faith away, deprive the people of power by setting up some authority over them, be it a political party or military organization, and you have dealt a fatal blow to the revolution. You will have robbed it of its main source of strength, the masses. You will have made it defenseless.
So that can be true. That can be true that you've robbed it of its greatest source of strength, the people. But a lot of that depends on who the other side has. If there are a lot of other people from, say, an invading nation with a very large army, it may not be true that you have the numbers. You certainly would have the heart to defend it, and by and large, people that are in any military of any great size are either conscripted into it, so they're basically it's a form of slavery. You have no freedom, and you're forced to go kill for your country, or they're given huge incentives and they recruit from people who are impoverished. So in that case, who knows how much they really believe in the cause either. But by and large, people don't join the military of large nations and powerful nations because they really believe in the cause of imperialism or invading foreign lands or that sort of thing. So you could still say that you have the heart advantage in that case because you're really fighting for something that you believe in, whereas they're likely not. But yeah, it's kind of the sad fact of the world today that major powers at this point, with this much funding for their militaries, especially nuclear powers, can kind of just do whatever they want militarily, and there's not a lot of people that can outright stop them. Now, you may be able to fight a guerrilla war against a force like that. That certainly worked in Afghanistan. That worked in many of the places that Vietnam, great example, Korea. There's a lot of times when that can be effective, and it's maybe the only thing that's effective against a large occupying force. But yeah, okay, I guess that's all I have to say about that particular point.
Just sucks that most of those superpowers are capitalist ones that would team up to try to put a squash to socialist movements, like we've seen happen time and time again.
Time and time again. Time and time again. And yeah, I mean, it really, excuse me, it really makes you think about what sort of a place do they not tend to go after. So there are some leftist revolutions around the world that are relatively small. They may have their own military, but have not yet been decimated by right-wing capitalist forces. There's places like the EZLN, which is the Zapatista movement, which is a pretty sizable chunk of Mexico, basically an autonomous state. You have Rojava in Syria, who sometimes has collaborated with United States forces against ISIS. I guess in both cases, I mean, Rojava has oil, but they're not exactly Saudi Arabia. And EZLN, I'm not sure what resources they're sitting on top of, but I'm guessing it's probably nothing that the U.S. really cares that much about. Otherwise, they or some other force would probably come up with a reason to, launch a coup.
Share democracy with them?
Share democracy with them. Yes.
By force.
Yeah. Well, the best way to spread democracy is from the barrel of a gun around the world.
Right.
Yeah.
I do.
So.
Doom wants to say hi.
Hey, how's it going, buddy? Must be hard being a husky in all that heat, huh?
Yep. She loves the air conditioning.
I bet so. Aw.
You're a good girl. Oh, I get kisses. You're so sweet.
Aw, that's so
Precious
sweet.
girl.
So anyway, so Berkman is pretty optimistic here that if you can just get people past that hump, and they're living in a free society, and sharing all things with one another, that's enough to kind of defend against anything. I don't know that that's always going to be the case, and always going to be enough in every case. But I like that he's at least putting out the idea there. He's trying to inspire people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Armed workers and peasants are the only effective defense of the revolution. By means of their unions and syndicates, they must always be on guard against counter-revolutionary attack. The worker in the factory and mill, in mine and field, is the soldier of the revolution. He is at his bench and plow, or on the battlefield according to need. But in his factory, as in his regiment, he is the soul of the revolution, and it is his will that decides its fate. In industry,
it's interesting that you had brought up Vietnam, because that kind of what he was talking about right there reminds me a lot of what happened during the Vietnam War, where the U.S. was baffled just time and time again that they would go to these villages and they would distance wherever they go, and they would meet just villagers taking up arms against them and stuff like that. They couldn't understand that the Vietnamese government, I don't know if Viet Cong is even the right term for it, but anyway, the people in charge had redistributed a lot of land to the peasants.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was shortly before the U.S. came in or what exactly the timeline was for that, but they had been given exactly what Berkman had talked about. So in that case, that really did work. These people were not going to give up.
Right.
And it's not as though they were living luxuriantly. They had their rice paddies and their village life, and they got by. But
Right. It's survival, and damn right they're going to defend it.
absolutely,
You know.
absolutely. And again, I guess just due to the geography of it, Vietnam was a unique situation because the jungles were so dense that it was very hard to fight in. It was pretty good. You couldn't really think of a better place to launch a guerrilla war than a place that is like 100% tree cover wherever you go. So they had that going for them. And then also, I don't know, I guess a lot of the areas that the U.S. was trying to occupy were out in rural areas, and maybe that had some benefit too of just being dispersed across the country instead of having them able to concentrate on a single city or something like that. But
And especially the way that they had built those underground tunnel networks in all of these rural areas where they could pop up out of nowhere and take out a bunch of the US soldiers and disappear again,
that's right.
like how do you fight that when you never know where somebody's going to pop up out of somewhere and disappear right back into hidden stuff, because like they would have the entryways to those tunnels so well hidden, like they didn't know where the hell they came from.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. So maybe there is more truth to what Berkman's talking about than I'm ready to accept. Maybe it's just too much cynicism on my part. But
Well, to be fair, I don't know how many people around the world would be willing to go to such lengths of building a tunnel network like that for self-preservation in wartime. That was quite innovative.
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, they obviously had something that they wanted to fight for. You don't convince a widely dispersed peasant population to take up your cause for nothing. I mean,
Right. Absolutely.
all right, moving on.
the shop committees in the barracks, the soldiers' committees, these are the fountainhead of all revolutionary strength and activity. It was the volunteer Red Guard, made up of boilers, that successfully defended the Russian Revolution in its most critical initial stages. Later on, it was again volunteer peasant regiments who defeated white armies. The regular Red Army, organized later, was powerless without the volunteer workers and peasants divisions.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think he might be referring to what was known as the Black Army, which was Nestor Makhno's army, and he was an anarchist from what is present day Ukraine, and he was instrumental. He fought tirelessly to help the Red Army finally defeat the White Army, which was the imperialist army. And there were certain key battles where they said that had he not intervened at that critical time, it's very possible that the Red Army could have been destroyed, smashed apart by the White Army, because they were getting worn down at that point. But yeah, so I'm not sure if that's exactly who he's talking about, but that does sound like Nestor Makhno's army, because it was largely peasant. He was really big on land reform and just taking all the land from landlords. He hated landlords. He wanted to just redistribute it all to the peasants, and he started just doing it. He didn't wait for anyone to tell him. Hello, Ukes. I have no idea how to pronounce that name, so if you could give me some help there. But hello, we are talking about What is Communist Anarchism by Alexander Berkman. We're in the last chapter tonight. So yeah. So anyway, definitely a character I'd like to look into more. I've only heard a little bit. I'm not okay. So I'll speak for myself. I lean more towards anarcho-communism, which is kind of a balance between anarchism and communism. What I believe most of all is a strategy called well, the precise term is leaving my brain right at the right moment. It's not libertarian municipalism. That's the term for it. So basically, it is similar to a communist way of organizing, except for instead of from the top down, where the highest level of government has the most power, you go from the bottom up. So you organize your neighborhood first, or maybe just your block even. That becomes the base unit of government, and from there you voluntarily federate with other like-minded communities until eventually you have a large federation. Could be as large as a nation even. That's my position. But I believe in very horizontally organized structures of power. I believe in as much direct democracy as is possible. And I believe in that everyone, just by being a human being, deserves their basic needs to be met, no matter what choices they make in life, no matter what one or a lot of people might think about them. I think that, yeah, everyone deserves the basic necessities of life. I mean, it's not utopia, because we're not just thinking about these ideas. We're thinking about how to actually move towards them. We're looking at examples in history, like in this book. They bring up a lot of examples in history. So it's not really utopia in that sense. But if you're thinking more like conventional sense, I mean, you could call it a dream of something better. I'm skeptical that we'll ever get to any level of anarchism on a wide scale in my lifetime, but that doesn't mean I don't want to start us down that path. And then Trish, you can go with your basic belief system if you want to lay that out at all.
Yeah, well, I'm with you on all of that. I am a communist with anarchist dreams. The thing is, I understand that anarchism is literally the highest level of communism. It's something that we are trying to build towards, and that takes unity. So, the fact that there are ANCOMs out there like yourself who see this common ground, an area that we can work together to actually bring these things about, that's what gives me some hope. Because in the end, we want the same goals. We want everyone to have their life needs met. And we're at a point in industrialization and automation that we can really make that happen. And, you know, it's a matter of preventing further harm, because as living beings, we are born with that ethical right to not be harmed and to withhold anything that is necessary to survive itself. That would be unethical to keep these things behind a paywall and to prevent people from having their basic needs met in order to preserve a profit margin. I see you say your grandparents lost their lives because of communism. I don't know how. I'm curious, because communism means providing for everyone's needs. Communism means that we collectively work together to make sure that everyone has housing, food, healthcare, education, the necessities for life. Um, so, there that is in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'd be curious too to learn. And still, I don't know how to pronounce your name. So again, if you could help, that would be nice. You say lost in air quotes. Does that mean that they had to flee Poland, supposedly because of communism, or why is the lost in quotes? Um,
Right.
Were they landowners? What is their background? Did they just lose their private property? Were they business people? What exactly happened, and how was it communism's fault?
Right.
That would be my question.
Because it kind of makes me think about the people who came here from Cuba after the revolution, saying
Yeah.
that they lost everything. And really, they were plantation owners whose property got turned into communal property for
Yep.
people to live in. And they were no longer allowed to basically have slave farms. So
Yep.
I don't feel bad for them to lose, in air quotes, their ability to exploit slavery and to wield that power holding the land itself over the people's heads of, like, if you want to have a spot to exist, then you have to be my slave. No, stuff like that, or other exploitative measures
Right.
like landlords who tried to turn
Yep.
personal property into private property by making it a place where they earn money from.
Right.
We have a problem with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a reason that it is called landlording. It's
Yeah.
because it is a vestige of feudalism, basically. Under feudalism, titled people, lords, barons, ladies, marquises, what have you, they were given areas to rule over, and they would make their money by ruling over those areas. I mean, they wouldn't contribute necessarily any labor to it. Um, they might put on a feast once in a while, but by and large, they got their money from just owning things, and that's basically the same system that we have with landlords today. So, UIX, it's just like those three letters. Okay. So they were living poor for 45 years. They wanted to live life as in the West. Okay.
Do you realize how many of us in the West have lived poor our entire lives
Absolutely true.
because of capitalism?
Absolutely true. Yeah, I mean, both my wife and I, we're not doing too badly. We make several times minimum wage, each of us, and yet, because
But
of
pay-
debt, because of life circumstances, we still rent an apartment. We still um, don't really have savings to speak of. Um, we're trying to work towards it, but we're still and we're still way better off than a lot of people. I alone make almost the household median income for the United States. Just me myself, and median income is based on a two income earner household. So I'm getting close to that point myself, and yet I'm still not really comfortable. I don't have health insurance. I have some through my wife's insurance, but that's it. And it's just dental at this point. I don't have basic health insurance. Um, so if I'm at this level and still struggling this much, I can only imagine what people below me, the large half of the country. It's more than half of the country. I believe is I can't. Yeah, I mean, it would have to be more than half the country because I almost make the median income myself. So yeah, that means there's a lot of people below me. I don't know how they do it. I seriously don't. So maybe they were taken in by stories of the West. Again, it'd probably take a long time to unravel this entire history of what led to them wanting to come to the West. Well, did they idolize the West? So were they just peasants? They felt overlooked by communism. Like,
Did they buy the bullshit lines about American exceptionalism? Because I'll
Yeah.
tell you, as George Carlin said, the American dream is just that. It's a fucking dream. The only way you'd believe it is if you're asleep. It's never been a real thing for everybody.
okay.
It's been a real thing for seldom few who won the birth lottery and were able to make use of their family's money to start their own businesses and whatnot, but your common citizen doesn't have even the reach to grab hold of that American dream. It's a pipe dream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, if you have more that you'd like to share, we're all ears too. So Natalie says, "What I'm missing about anarchism and how social communism can go hand in hand, I tend to feel that anarchism is more pervasive or more preservation of self versus communism, which is equity for all. And within anarchism, there's a spectrum of collectivist versus individualist. I tend to side more with the collectivist side. I want to contribute as much as I can to society because I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think first and foremost about am I, personally living my most anarchist lifestyle? Am I being as pure as I can about living up to my personal beliefs? I want more to help others come to my beliefs and eventually push towards starting to build up, mutual aid networks. I think mutual aid is the fundamental thing for building any sort of anarchist movement and really any good leftist movement. And that kind of, by design, is a collectivist action. It's not usually just one person running everything, and it's not people volunteering necessarily so they can just feel good about, being a good anarchist.
Right. I see anarcho-communism as finding that balance between self-determination as far as your liberty and your choices over your own life, keeping that in balance with your obligation and duty to society to make
Yeah.
sure that everyone else has that too.
Right.
The foundation of that is meeting life needs, basic life needs, first and foremost for everybody, because the only way that we can thrive is if we make sure everyone is at least surviving. Then you
Right.
have something to go on to build from. You have that ability to actually spend your time innovating instead of necessarily going and having to slave away working for someone else's gain. You know, the only
Absolutely.
way I see that we can push society
Yes.
forward is if our thinkers, our innovators, and stuff um, are actually able to spend the time doing that, and they're not stuck in a bullshit job working for somebody else just to justify their existence itself. And UIX said, okay, maybe you think Soviet communism wasn't right communism. Well, in some ways it was, in some ways it wasn't. There were definitely
Sure.
mistakes made that we can learn from in order to build things in a better manner for the future. Um, I think Cuba set a beautiful example for how to do communism right. Their government is completely beholden to the people. It is accountable to the people. When the people say, we want this, we need that, they get to it and they make it happen. They get it done because otherwise they're not going to be in government anymore. They're going to lose their seat. They'll be booted. And they
Yeah.
are actually at a point where they have pretty much ended poverty there. Everybody has housing, everybody has health care. I don't know why you think Cuba's poor.
Oh, okay. Let's not do this sort of thing though, where you just like spaghetti Wallace with all of your talking points until something sticks. I don't like that method
Right.
of discourse. That's not really productive. Like where you take an argument, you throw it out at us, we respond to it, and then you just go on to a different argument without saying, okay, maybe you were right, without ever actually finishing up the original point. Let's stick to one point at a
Right.
time, if you want to talk about this sort of thing, UIX. Uh, so from my own perspective, I have not studied the Soviet Union very closely. Kind of where I'm at right now, and I'm okay with leaving it amorphous in my brain. I don't have to be beholden to the way any place has done it so far.
Right.
So I'm guessing, I'm pretty certain that life for the average person under the USSR was much better than Western propaganda would ever have you believe. I think that's pretty clear
Yes.
from all the evidence. I also probably don't think it was as good as a lot of the really diehard Soviet. I don't even know what the right word for it. I guess the cheerleaders again I don't mean it quite as in a derogatory way, but the people that are most for um, doing apologia for the Soviet Union, it probably wasn't as good as they make it out to be either. but it's probably a hell of a lot better than what we even have here now, except for maybe in the case of free speech. But free speech only gets you so much if you're struggling just to survive. You can't eat words. You can't live inside words. You can't take the words to work. Free speech is good. It's very important. But if I had to choose between, a very absolutist level of free speech and having my basic necessities met as a person, I'm going to choose basic necessities and hope that the same is true for everybody. I don't think it has to be that trade-off. I think we can do better.
Right, we can do better. That's one of those points where we can learn from that, yeah, we absolutely do need the communism factors of providing for everyone's needs. What we don't need is the authoritarianism, and that's something that, as you can see from right here in the United States, you can have authoritarianism under any financial system. We've had capitalism here forever, and guess what? We live in a very authoritarian country.
Yes. Well, I mean, authoritarian.
Yeah, far worse than Russia. I just want to point out that, we currently right now have more people in prison than the fucking gulags ever did cumulatively.
Oh yeah, we're number one for imprisoning people. I want to say in world history in terms of absolute numbers and percentage of population, at least in terms of the way the world is now. Both those things, per capita and absolute numbers, we imprison the most people, and yet we somehow think we're the land of the free. That doesn't quite align. So in that case too, much less freedom for a lot of people.
Right. And
these terms like gulag and authoritarian, these have been so loaded over the years. It's the same thing as communist itself and anarchism. All these terms have been smeared by people that love capitalism because it works really well for them at the expense of everyone else. They've put in a lot of hours and a lot of time and funded a lot of people to smear these concepts, make gulag sound much more atrocious than prison, when we call Guantanamo Bay a prison, but by any definition of the word gulag, it is many times worse. It's 24-hour torture for a lot of people, like literal torture. So, and then authoritarianism, does that just mean a strong central government? Because that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to do bad things, especially if you have some accountability, like the way that Lenin had conceived of things when we went through State and Revolution, which you can look in the archives of my channel. We learned that Lenin's conception, and again, I haven't studied how close that matched with reality, but still his conception of things was that every elected official would be immediately recallable by a majority vote of the people that elected them. So that's supposed to be the people's check on power at the very least. So these terms, you got to get past just being scared by the terms if you want to actually learn anything about the way things were, the way things are, and the way things could be.
Right. Because when it comes to that Western line of thinking, the CIA was very effective in their Red Scare propaganda and convincing people of total, utter bullshit.
Yeah. And they're still very effective. And our textbooks have been completely sanitized and written by the people that won all of these accords. Yeah. And if you don't believe me, you should check out the other series that Trisha and I do together on Mondays, A People's History of the United States of America by Howard Zinn. Going through that book and finding out quite a lot about what the history books have left out. You can come in if you like. Amanda's going to join us.
Awesome.
I'm going to move over here.
Special chair takes up a lot of room.
Yeah. But let's get beyond that UIX. We can talk about historical examples of this and that and what may have happened, what may not have happened. What sort of a society do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a society where everyone is treated more or less equally? They are just as human beings, provided housing, food, transportation, education, healthcare, access to community, these sorts of basic necessities of life, which is something that we can do with the amount of productivity that we have in the world right today. It's a matter of will, first and foremost. and then a little bit of logistics, but with enough will, we can get beyond the logistics question, no problem. So, would you rather live in that sort of society, or would you like to live in one where only a few people get to live wildly opulent lifestyles? The sky is the limit. They can start any business. They can get any loan. They can get into any club. They really get to have whatever they want, but it's at the expense of over half of everyone else.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the basic question between socialism and socialism includes not just market socialism, but it's anarchism. It's an umbrella term for all left ideologies. So that's the difference between socialism and capitalism, or really any right ideology. In my mind, what
Capitalism, those numbers, as far as the extreme wealthy versus the rest, there's a reason why in Occupy we coined those terms of like the 1% who hold all the wealth versus the other 99. We are the 99%. It literally is that drastic at this point.
Absolutely.
It's not just more than half. It's almost everyone living at barely subsistent levels or below the poverty line, so that a literal small handful of people can be so exorbitantly
Had to
wealthy
bring so much ice, didn't you?
that the next 100 generations of their family are still going to be fucking wealthy just from what's left behind.
Absolutely. Okay, so UIX, you say it sounds good, but it doesn't work. Well, it's currently working right now. You should look into Rojava. You should look into the EZLN, the Zapatista movement. You should actually see some alternative perspectives about Cuba and some of these other socialist countries. It does work right now. It's working for a lot of people right now. And EZLN and Rojava, these are not small areas. These are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people that live under much more democratic systems right now. So why don't you think it works, though? Let's get to the heart of it. Why doesn't it work? Are you going to say that people are inherently selfish, that they can't get along? Because to my mind, that's all the more reason to build a system where the selfish and the ruthless and the psychopathic are not rewarded for being selfish and ruthless and psychopathic. And guess what system does that? Rewards all those people. It's not socialism.
Right. It's
It is
capitalism.
it's capitalism.
And as far as the queues for basic products in Cuba,
Come on.
how about you look into all of the other countries like the United States that have literally barred other countries from making trade with Cuba? That's not a result of socialism. That's a result of capitalist countries putting trade embargoes against Cuba because they're salty about Cuba being socialist and communist. And it has absolutely nothing to do with Cuba's actual ability to provide for itself.
Yep, absolutely. They've had an embargo from basically the inception of the country. So there you go. Human nature is competitive and hierarchy. So why don't we set up a system that doesn't reward people like that? Why don't we set up a system that distributes power as evenly as possible so those few assholes can't just lord it over the rest of us?
Right. And that's your statement is a falsehood from the beginning because you are literally trying to claim that humans naturally are competitive and hierarchical. No, the fuck we're not, because if that was the case, that we were just genetically encoded to be douchebags, there wouldn't be a lot of us out here who are more about collaboration and equality and equity, not competitive and hierarchical. Your statement is
Absolutely
false.
true. I mean, I believe it's false too.
Generalization.
I agree. It is. I agree that is false. But also, no matter if you do think it's true, that still, why would you want a system that rewards that?
Right.
That doesn't make any
Right.
sense at all to me. It doesn't make any sense at all.
It's self-defeatist to want to reward the worst in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And basic rights shouldn't be capitalized on. Healthcare is a right.
Yeah.
Food is a right. Shelter is a right.
I agree.
Everyone should have it. I don't need a McMansion. I don't give a fuck. Do I have a house that doesn't have rats in it? Cool. I'll live there. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Like,
that I think that's the case for most people.
right. Like, hell, I would stay where we're at right now if that was like just ours, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is our apartment, this is our dwelling. Fine. Would it be dope if you built a balcony? Sure. If I didn't have to pay rent and it was okay for me to build my own balcony, would I? Yes, I would.
Absolutely.
And that would be like, oh, what the shit's the word?
Well, that's kind of a circular logic there, UIX. We are naturally hierarchical and competitive. So why don't we build a system that goes against that because because this is the only system that works. It sounds like the system doesn't really work though, except for a few people.
And it's not natural.
I mean, I disagree that it's
Yeah.
natural too, but
Yeah,
I mean,
humans
I'm telling you,
existed on this fucking planet for how many tens of thousands of years without capitalism? Capitalism is relatively new in the human timeline, and there is nothing natural about it.
Right.
What is natural is how humans lived for tens of thousands of years prior to capitalism, of living collectively, living communally, and actually meeting each other's needs. That's how humanity was able to even become developed when it comes to agriculture and things like that, because people fucking worked together to make sure that everyone in their village had their fucking needs met. So understand that when you keep calling that bullshit natural, you are utterly incorrect. There's nothing natural about being put into a system that works for the benefit of a few at the expense of everyone else. That's not natural.
and look here, I've given you now two examples. I'm spoon feeding it to you. Two examples of people that are living and very much more inclusive, much more closer to direct democratic systems than we are right now. It's happening. They're not falling apart. Zapatistas have been around since the 90s, Rojava since I think the late aughts. Um, Still, it's existent today. Here's two examples you can look at right now. There's plenty of examples throughout history of groups of people that have lived much more democratically than we have. And that's what it's about. Democracy is about people having equal power and equal say in whatever matters are at hand. We say we have a democracy right now in the West, but really we have a democracy that's set up for property rights. I mean, that's at the basis of all constitutions. It's one reason, as Natalie was talking before, about how tax laws are still in favor of passing on generational wealth. Yes, the system we have perpetuates itself. And so that's one reason that most leftists say we cannot hope to achieve any sort of socialism, whatever it may be, through democratic reforms, because baked into the system is benefits for the few.
Right. As well as the ability to walk back those reforms.
That as well.
I think about like food situations too, and maybe this is off task and you guys can totally tell me to get out, but like,
Oh,
let's say we're going to the grocery store, right? And I'm shopping with my pal Zen motherfucker, and we're getting some produce, and there's only one bunch of bananas left. And I'm not gonna fight Zen motherfucker for those bananas. Maybe she's got a need for the bananas more than me, but she's got kiwi in her cart, and she's like, hey, if I can have those bananas, you can have my kiwi. I'm like, cool, peace out. I will take your kiwi. You can have these bananas. We're both cool. Or maybe we would talk it through and split the things, right?
That's what I was
Like,
thinking. We can split
let's
the
share the
bundle of
bananas. Let's split the kiwi. That way each of us can have a little bit of what we want.
Right.
There's no need to like fight
Hoard.
for things and hoard things. And I think most people are really like thoughtful and considerate of others at the end of the day. Like,
Right.
someone with celiacs can get their gluten-free stuff and should be prioritized. Like, they get first dibs on this. But if no one else wants it and it's going to expire, then by all means, please take.
Right.
There's enough for everybody.
absolutely. Again, it's just a question of willpower to say that everyone, yes, deserves these things, regardless of people's ability to make profit. No one deserves to starve or go without health care that would save their life or any of these things that help them live, you know, a basically stable life. Um,
Right.
and then it's just a matter of then figuring out the logistics of it because I mean, under the market system, we waste a lot of stuff because, especially in agriculture, just because a farmer can't get the right price at the right time, or they can't get someone to ship their materials at a particular time, and then they dump it out. If they can't get the right price, they may just trash it all, literally put it in a landfill because the cost of having to package it and distribute it and all these things would be more than the price they would be getting back for the stuff. That's the market system.
It's, it's just manufactured. It's manufactured necessity. And like, think about back to the start of the pandemic, right? There's this huge run on toilet paper. Ha ha ha. TP TP. No one's got none. What about a bidet?
When the
You
store
know?
ran out of toilet paper, I wasn't worried about it because wet wipes.
Right.
Oh.
But you're like thinking outside the box, right? Like a
Right.
bidet, wet wipes, they're going to get you cleaner at the end of the day than the. Nope, don't go there.
Not really sure where you're
It's
going
just a
with this
fact.
example,
You're not
but-
getting
I'll
anything
explain
clean
it
with
to you
toilet
later.
paper. You're only getting it dry.
Right.
So I'm a wet wipe person anyway. So the toilet paper hoarding did not even affect my life.
Right. But again,
Careful
like
with those
it's
septic systems, though. But
this mass consumerism and like hoarding of shit, it's unnecessary.
oh yeah,
It
absolutely.
really is.
I mean, I accidentally hoard dental floss, but like that's, you know, if
personal
somebody
story.
else needed it,
You're
I
not,
would I would give it to them.
you were not
Right.
hoarding so much that other people can't have it.
That's true. I just have 6 rolls
so,
at any
yeah.
given time.
This is what we mean by hoarding is taking up enough of a resource the way the landlords do. They take up enough housing that if you really want a house and you don't have the right credit score, you don't have the right savings, you got to go through them. So they're using this artificial scarcity to make you pay more than you would if you had a mortgage for that same piece of property. Because of course, they couldn't make a profit off of you if they charge you less than the mortgage.
Or even
But-
what the mortgage is.
Or even what the mortgage is.
When you're paying rent, you're covering the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, all of it, plus
Absolutely.
a profit margin for the landlord. So for
Right.
them to try to
For
tell you you can
maintenance.
afford to pay more to rent, but you can't afford to get approved for the loan to buy, to
Ludicrous.
that this is what I have to say to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Also, when your ass is paying rent on time every fucking month, that doesn't count towards your GD credit score. You have to fight to get that put on and factored in. You're like, okay, so you're going to hold this over me to get the damn apartment. You're going to hold this over me to get a damn house. Even though it is not a factor. Like, my paying your stupid ass on time means nothing.
Right.
Right.
Like,
So let's tie this back to the current system then. So you have because of our laws under capitalism, and because they respect private property so much that they uphold it every time. There's no law against being a landlord. There's no law against hoarding all the property in a given town. Usually that's the case. And so as long as we have the ability for people to exploit one another, some people are going to exploit one another, which is why we have to do away with the system that we have entirely and come up with a system that favors people over things. Yeah, right. People over
Yeah.
profit.
People over profit.
oh.
And that sounds like something really fucking scary to capitalists and those who suck the capitalist boot because they feel like temporarily embarrassed millionaires when they're really just working class, never gonna fucking be a millionaire unless they win the lotto. You know, sadly, they help to reinforce all of these things that harm them too.
Right? And that concept of people over profits, a kindergartner can understand that. You could say that to them and be like, what does that mean? Is like People are important, stuff's not.
Yeah.
You grown-ass dragon humans hoarding resources and monetary shit. Like, ha ha ha, look at me. I have all the things. And you have nothing and you will like it. Sorry,
It
I'm
makes
not
me
mad.
think of the other night I watched the movie Trumbo, which is about a Hollywood movie writer, a screenwriter, who was on the blacklist when the Red Scare propaganda first started. He was one of the Hollywood writers that got blacklisted and forced to not be able to work under his own name for a while. And in one scene, he was having a conversation with his daughter, and she was asking him, you know, like, "Are you a communist? And what does that mean? Is mom a communist?" And she gets to the point of, "Okay, so am I a communist?" And he said, "Okay, look at it this way: if you have a packed lunch that you take to school with you, and the kid next to you doesn't have any food to eat, are you going to let them go hungry, or are you going to share with them?" And she was like, "I'm going to share with them, and I'll give them half of my food." And he said, "All right, you're a dirty commie." You know.
This is part of the essence of leftism. It's the idea that that we can provide for one another. We can provide everything for everybody. That was a big Kropotkin saying, everything for everybody, all for all. And that comes not just from the idea that we have the physical capability of doing it, but the only reason that we are here, that we have buildings that were built before any of us were alive, that we have these systems that were invented long before any of us were alive, that we have these systems of education that have come down and been refined for hundreds or thousands of years. The only reason we have any of our wealth today is because of past generations. So for all of those gains to go to just a few privileged people who happen to be holding the right piece of paper that says that they get to have it all at the expense of everyone else makes no sense. We are all due the inheritance of history. So yeah.
And we all have an obligation to, I don't know, do some contributing to fixing up the infrastructure that is currently falling the fuck apart, at least here and in many other parts of the world where it just hasn't kept up. You know, we're too busy spending money on fucking war and setting up a whole bunch of military colonies, to be fucking bluntly honest about it. That we haven't bothered to keep things even running properly at home when it comes to, you know, bridges caving in and things like that. We're still dealing with dumb shit like that. You know, part of that contribution has to be to making sure that we all have safe means to actually get around and exist in this life amidst those things that we have inherited from past generations. Part of that is an obligation to maintain them and improve them. Other countries are doing so. We're not. Look at China. Look at their transportation system. Bullet trains. We still have
Years ahead of ours. Yeah.
Thrusting the fuck out as it, you know, rumbles by.
And like, I think too, like, we really put ourselves at a disadvantage of a society when only the people that can afford things are the ones that get things. Because I work in school. Yep, tell it every episode. But there are so many brilliant kids out there, but because of their race or other things or economic situations, they don't have equitable access to college and things like that. So, like, they never get the chance to excel and better society. Like, there could be so many more people other than Donald Trump Jr.'s dingle F kid. And he gets all these things because he's in the right place at the right fucking time. He's not smart. He has no talent. He has nothing to offer the world other than looking genetically, be nice. He's a mess. And he's not contributing anything to society in a meaningful manner. And that's probably depriving someone else who could, like, contribute more to society as a whole. And wouldn't be like, well, I found it, so it's mine, and I'm not going to share it with anybody else. Sorry.
Right.
I agree.
Fine.
You're right. We are hindering society itself by not having equitable access to higher education.
Right. And, like, the train thing also that plays into that. Access to how to get to these places. What if some kid lives out in the middle of Bumblefuck and can't get to the college that they just got a scholarship to?
Right.
Well, I guess we're just not going to give it to them, so let's light the money on fire.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Like,
They would
Oh, yeah.
probably expect him to move into, an area by campus. But again, unless that's a
That's-
resource that's going to be provided, what are they supposed to do? Take out even more student loans, to like cover housing? Because I can tell you that adds up really fast, and it gets fucking expensive to take out loans to cover your living expenses while going to school too.
oh,
So
absolutely.
housing should be provided. Schooling and housing, things that are necessities for survival, should not be behind a fucking paywall.
Nope.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
Like,
We all deserve to live.
yeah. Do I need Swedish fish? No, I don't need Swedish fish,
But you love them.
but I love them. But I'd be willing to pay for them. I'd even pay double for them if the rest of my stuff was free.
Sure.
I would
Right.
still go to work. It wouldn't be a deterrent for me at all.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I cite this statistic often, but the number one thing that people look for in a job that will keep them at a job is
Bennies.
no, it's not actually money.
I said
It's-
bennies.
Bennies.
Benefits.
Benefits.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
I mean more in a positive sense, not in a if I leave this I'm going to die, but more like I want to be at this job because, and that answer time and time again is they feel like their work contributes to society in some way. So people have an innate desire, by and large, to do something that benefits other people. To me, that is the strongest argument against the idea that people are just evil and selfish and hierarchical and all these sorts of things. But yeah, society's not going to collapse just because people's needs are met. That is the fear of the capitalists, and we definitely saw that. Natalie was right to point out that during the pandemic, a lot of these things were really revealed. The ideas behind the systems that we have, those capitalists were losing their minds because no one wants to work anymore, and people can just stay home. They don't have to come and under the threat of starvation, because that's what's at the bottom of it. It is work or
Right.
starve. But they don't have to come to my factory and make widgets for minimum wage, because they can stay at home and get money otherwise. They were terrified because they think that's the only way to motivate people. That's clearly not.
And it's absolute bullshit, because I can tell you, I've collected unemployment once before. That money did not show up in time. That money was not going to cover all my expenses and needs, rent, car payment, to get to said job, insurance, etc. So, like,
Right.
don't sit there and play like this is just super glamorous. And, like, there are so many hoops.
Right.
There's so much paperwork. There's, like, oh my God. I think I did about 3 hours worth of paperwork just to get signed up. Because this is, like, during the pandemic, and I couldn't find a summer job because everything was, like, closed. So I couldn't do my norm. And I didn't see a check until September. Like, had I not been married to someone who was still employed,
Yeah.
I'd have been a streetwalker. I'd have sold a body part or two. How else would I
Right.
have made it? Kidneys? You got two.
Yeah, that's not a great position, and
No.
so many, like half of Americans who are alive right now, if they missed a couple of paychecks, they would be out on the street. This is the great capitalist system that's supposed to be wealth for anyone who wants it. I don't think so.
I was just reading a study on the internet someplace. Sounds super credible, right, guys? But, like, it said 95% of millennials will not have enough money saved to retire.
Yeah.
And Social Security will be gone.
Well, I mean, already the boomers, despite having the vast majority of wealth, are finding it difficult to have enough money to retire. So it's only going to get worse as Gen X goes through that phase, and then us.
Right. I mean, your dad's well into his 70s, and he's
Not,
still
he's 70 years old.
whatever. He's 5 years past
Well
being
into
able
it,
to
I think.
retire.
He's well past retirement. That's a good point.
Fine.
Yes.
Excuse me. He's fantastic, though. But he is well past the time to retire, and he is still working.
Yep.
That's not cool.
It's not cool.
He should stay at home. He should organize his computer room.
Someone should organize the computer.
I could do it.
Yeah, because you'd bring just a bunch of garbage bags.
Like, he should
But anyway.
be able to pursue his hobbies that he enjoys, you know? Like, my dad's about the same age. He retired a few years ago. He at least had a pension because he worked for GM. So, you know, he and my mom, between that and what they're getting right now in Social Security, are able to live comfortably. And my dad's able to do hobbies and shit. Like, my mom always has him building something. He loves doing woodwork and whatnot. So, like, he has built them a new banister on the stairs. And all kinds of, you know, like, he gets to do that type of shit now, and at his own pace when he wants to. You know, he gets to enjoy the pool in the summertime and relax. There's no excuse for somebody that age to not be able to retire
Right.
and enjoy life. And
Yes.
you know, that's the thing, is the way the government is currently treating Social Security like their own personal fucking piggy bank. It's fucking us, and that was never supposed to be used for anything except paying out to people's Social Security who are already retired. It was never supposed to be, here's a fucking fuck off fund for the government to
Right.
however they
Dip
see fit.
into.
Right. I am enjoying these diversions quite a bit, but I really do want to get through this book. In the allotted time, we got about 25 minutes left,
Always in
and
trouble.
not quite 20 minutes of show or of chapter left. But let's
Always a distraction.
no. I mean, people were asking questions, and
Right.
it sparked some good discussion. I'm glad we talked about all these important issues.
What they want.
Same. I think
Yep.
we lost UIX though.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Hopefully they at least considered some of the things we had to say, maybe looked at some of the links that I've been throwing up this entire time of examples of people working together cooperatively and democratically without things devolving into, I don't know what they were afraid of, but it worked. And that's the thing. There's plenty of examples existent today of stuff that works. This is not just some utopian pipe dream. People can be more democratic in every facet of their life.
And the very fact that we exist as we do, desiring more collaboration, already living in manners of living collaboratively with those around us and participating in mutual aid and putting boots to the ground, the fact that we exist as we do disproves his, oh, well, it's just natural to be so competitive. No, the fuck it's not.
I would agree.
I don't want
Not
to fight with no one
Just
about
default state of
nothing.
being.
Yeah.
If people were inherently selfish and hierarchical, no infant would survive infancy.
Right.
You know, the fact that women have breasts that produce milk for their offspring at no benefit to them directly shows kind of what real human nature is. And that's it. That's one of the ideas that anarchists like to talk about a lot, is you take the idea of a basic family. No one is giving each other loans or extracting profit from one another, or, I mean, hopefully not trying to exploit one another. In most cases, that's not how it happens. People are given all the food, all the shelter, all the clothing, all of everything they need just by being a part of the family. All we want to do is extend that concept that makes sense to everybody on a very small level and extend it up to the societal level.
Right.
That's all we're talking
Everyone
about.
gets a plate before anybody gets seconds.
There's enough for everybody. Yep.
It's the pizza thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're going to get off on
I'm
tangents
gonna
again.
walk away because I'm gonna just
No,
get
no,
in
no, no,
trouble
no.
right-
Stay here. Stay here.
No, stay.
Stay. Please listen to. You haven't actually listened to any of the book yet, so let's listen to the book.
Right. Right.
Here we go. Here we
Siberia
go.
was freed from Kolchak and its hordes by such peasant volunteers. In the north of Russia, it was also workers and peasants' detachments that drove out the foreign armies which came to impose the yoke of native reactionaries upon the people. In the Ukraine, the volunteer peasant armies, known as the Povstansky, saved the revolution from numerous counter-revolutionary generals, particularly from Denikin, when the latter was already at the very gates of Moscow. It was the revolutionary Povstansky who freed the southern Russia from the invading armies of Germany, France, Italy, and Greece, and subsequently also routed the forces of General Wrangel. The military defense of the revolution may demand a supreme command, coordination of activities, discipline, and obedience to orders, but these must proceed from the devotion of the workers and peasants, and must be based on their voluntary cooperation through their own local, regional, and federal organizations. In the matter of defense against foreign attack, as in all other problems of the social revolution, the active interest of the masses, their autonomy and self-determination are the best guarantee of success. Understand well that the only really effective defense of the revolution lies in the attitude of the people. Popular discontent is the worst enemy of the revolution and its greatest danger. We must always bear in mind that the strength of the social revolution is organic, not mechanic. Not in mechanical military measures.
I think that's starting to happen now.
Explain.
So, all these places are starting to unionize, right? Because
Yes.
people are realizing that they are getting fucked over by the 6 largest industries that run everything in this damn country. So now it's collective bargaining, which is great. It needs to happen. But I feel like that's just like the tip, right? It's just beginning. Excuse me.
It's not quite going far enough. And if you look at even the history of unions, you'll see why. Because they were originally formed for the purpose of doing, as Marx said, and literally seizing the means of production, making all of these businesses owner operated, where every employee is now an owner instead and gets their fair share of, what they produce with their labor. However, unions began getting run in similar manners as our government runs, and getting really fucked up and becoming more pro-capitalist because of the Red Scare propaganda, demonizing all of the communists and anarchists who had actually done the founding of said unions. So what we need to do is, yes, unionize, but steer it back in the direction of the left.
Yeah.
and
Right.
get it back on track of, we don't just need these benefits met for our contract that, the next generation can get fucked out of on their contract. We need actual
Right.
ownership of said
Right.
production.
And we need inter-industry solidarity more than anything. None of this, oh, well, it's only the auto workers striking, it doesn't concern me, or it's only the longshoremen, I don't really care about that. We need to stand up with one another. The thing that the capitalists fear most of anything is a general strike, a real general strike, not the just the Facebook let's have a general strike, everybody, but like a real coordinated general strike. When that has happened in this country, the capitalists have become so afraid that they have gone in immediately and sent in the National Guard and actually started shooting people at that time. Hopefully we're not facing the same sort of thing today, but still, it shows the power of all of us collectively. It's like that meme that floats around a lot of the time, where it's like, all you got to do is stand up and the game is over, and it's a bunch of workers with a board game perched on their back. And the idea is that if everyone decides they're going to stand up, the game of Monopoly of capitalism is over. All of us working together is the thing that they fear the most, because it is the most potent weapon against them, because without us they are sunk, and that more than anything reveals the lie of oh, these self-made men who build up these businesses, the great men of history, all of the lies of capitalism, all these conceits and myths that are underpinning the entire thing, wrap up into this idea that some people are meant to rule and some people are meant to serve, and the people on the bottom are basically worthless and disposable, and the people at the top are special and indispensable.
But they're
All you
not.
got to do is stop working and see how true that is. If we all did it together, that myth would be run through forever.
Like, Minneapolis public schools went on strike, and now their school district is extended another 10 days because the teachers are like, hey, you're not going to fucking dock our pay.
Right.
You're not going to give us, this teacher starting salary is way too low. You're never going to fill these jobs. Your para positions pay too low. You're never going to fill these jobs. Like, get it together. If you think you're going to get people that are good, that are going to stay, you got to offer more. You got to do better.
Right.
Yeah.
You got money. Where are you putting it?
And that's wonderful to see groups of people starting to feel their power and really see that they can make that difference, because so long labor has just been dead. Basically from the time of Reaganomics and Thatcherism, it's been the neoliberal experiment ever since, and that kind of that ratchet effect that's often talked about, where in order to garner more votes, the Democrats end up making themselves more right-wing, and that just pushes the right further, and like they end up just moving that whole Overton window further and further to the right, until the point where the wheels are starting to fall off of the entire machine.
Well, and it was really nice because when the teacher strike started in Minneapolis, then St. Paul joined in. Sorry. To stand in solidarity with them.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
That's what's up.
It was really cool. I'm sorry, I sound like crap.
Okay. All right, let's move on in the chapter.
Measures lies its might, but in industry, in its ability to reconstruct life,
Oh,
to establish liberty and justice.
no,
Let the people feel that it is indeed.
no. Amanda is feeling too coffee.
Yeah, I gotta save it for tomorrow.
So unfortunately, she's gonna have to leave us for tonight. But thank you for joining us very much. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Yes. Thanks for letting me crash your party, guys.
Absolutely.
And be sure to join us again tomorrow for Head Theory.
Yes.
Episode 2 for real this time, right?
Episode 2 for real.
Yep. So Trisha and Amanda are taking over the entire stream tomorrow, and they'll be talking about issues of mental health and all kinds of cool, crazy
Microdosing
things.
and everything that's wrong
Yeah.
with this damn country.
Yeah,
Everything.
everything.
All of it. It's trash. It's dog water. That's what the kids say.
Oh God, enough with the dog water. I hate
Dog
that
water.
phrase. Natalie says, "Take care, Amanda."
I will. I'm gonna save my voice tomorrow.
All right, let's continue on.
Lead their own cause which is at stake, and the last man of them will fight like a lion in its behalf. The same applies to internal as to external defense. What chance would any white general or counter-revolutionist have if he could not exploit oppression and injustice to incite people against the revolution? Counter-revolution can feed only on popular discontent. Where the masses are conscious that the revolution and all of its activities are in their own hands, then they themselves are managing things and are free to change their minds and methods when they consider it necessary. Counter-revolution can find no support and is harmless. But would you let counter-revolutionaries incite the people if they tried to? By all means. Let them talk all they like. To restrain them would serve only to create a persecuted class and thereby enlist popular sympathy for them and their cause. To suppress speech and press is not only a theoretic offense against liberty, it is a direct blow at the very foundations of the revolution.
So I like this concept here. So what he's saying is that if you fulfill these promises of the revolution, if you're starting to provide for everyone, if everyone's sharing with one another, doing mutual aid and all that stuff, everyone's needs are met, then you guard against stuff coming, people coming from the within society to try and build up an army of their own to overthrow the current system, because the one of the main recruiting tools is, well, they're not treating you well, so why don't you come with me and we'll overthrow them. You're taking away that entirely.
Right. They have no foundation there for the you're not being treated well if you're actually being treated better.
Right. Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
stop them in their tracks and correct them like, yeah, no. Just like the conservatives in Canada do about their health care.
Yeah. Very true.
It would, first of all, raise problems where none had existed before. It would introduce methods which must lead to discontent and oppression, to bitterness and strife, to prison and civil war. It would generate fear and distrust, would hatch conspiracies, and culminate in a reign of terror which has always killed revolutions in the past. The social revolution must be based on entirely different principles, on a new conception and attitude. Full freedom is the very breath of its existence, and it will never be forgotten that the cure for evil and disorder is more liberty, not suppression. Suppression leads only to violence and destruction. Will you not defend the revolution then, your friend demands? Certainly we will, but not against mere talk, not against an expression of opinion. The revolution must be big enough to welcome even the severest criticism, and profit by it if it is justified. The revolution will defend itself most determinedly against real counter-revolution, against all active enemies, against any attempt to defeat or sabotage it by forcible invasion or violence. That is the right of the revolution and its duty, but it will not persecute the conquered foe, nor wreak vengeance upon an entire social class because of the fault of individual members of it. The sins of the fathers shall not be visited upon their children. What will you do with counter-revolutionists? Actual combat and armed resistance involve human sacrifices, and the counter-revolutionists who lose their lives under such circumstances suffer the unavoidable consequences of their deeds. But the revolutionary people are not savages. The wounded are not slaughtered, nor those taken prisoner executed. Neither is practiced the barbarous system of shooting hostages as the Bolsheviki did. How do you treat counter-revolutionaries taken prisoner during an engagement? The revolution must find new ways, some sensible method of dealing with them. The old method is to imprison them, support them in idleness, and employ numerous men to guard and punish them. And while the culprit remains in prison, incarceration and brutal treatment still further embitter him against the revolution, strengthen his opposition, and nurse thoughts of vengeance and new conspiracies. The revolution will regard such methods as stupid and detrimental to its best interests. It will try instead humane treatment to convince the defeated enemy of the error and uselessness of his resistance. It will apply liberty instead of revenge. It will take into consideration that most counter-revolutionaries are dupes rather than enemies, deluded victims of some individuals seeking power and authority. It will know why they need enlightenment rather than punishment, and the former will accomplish more than the latter. Even today, this perception is gaining ground. The Bolsheviki defeated the Allied armies in Russia more effectively by revolutionary propaganda among the enemy soldiers than by strength of their artillery. These new methods have been recognized as practical even by the United States government, which is making use of them now in its Nicaraguan campaign. American airplanes scatter proclamations and appeals to the Nicaraguan people to persuade them to desert Sandino and his cause, and the American Army chiefs expect the best results from these tactics.
Oof. Not sure if he's saying that this is a good thing that they're doing, but definitely not a good thing that they were doing. We have been so brutal to Nicaragua and Guatemala and basically all of Central and South America and Mexico as well. Yeah, it was not a good thing that we were doing at all.
No. Was it effective tactics? Yes.
Yeah.
Was it a good thing? No.
No. Right. Anyway.
But the Sandino patriots are fighting for home and country against a foreign invader, while counter-revolutionists wage war against their own people. The work of their enlightenment is much simpler and promises better results. Do you really think that would be the best way to deal with counter-revolution? By all means. Humane treatment and kindness are more effective than cruelty and vengeance. The new attitude in this regard would suggest also a number of other methods of similar character. Various modes of dealing with conspirators and active enemies of the revolution would develop as soon as you begin to practice the new policy. The plan might be adopted, for instance, of scattering them individually or in small groups over districts removed from their counter-revolutionary influences, among committees of revolutionary spirit and consciousness. Consider also that counter-revolutionists must eat, which means that they would find themselves in a situation that would claim their thoughts and time for other things than hatching of conspiracies. The defeated counter-revolutionist, left at liberty, instead of being imprisoned, would have to seek means of existence. He would not be denied his livelihood, of course, since the revolution would be generous enough to feed even its enemies. But the man in question would have to join some community, secure lodgings and so forth, in order to enjoy the hospitality of the distributing center. In other words, the counter-revolutionary, quote, prisoners in freedom, would depend upon the community and its goodwill of its members for their means of existence. They would live in its atmosphere and be influenced by its revolutionary environment.
I like a lot about what he's saying right now as a strategy. Just
I do too.
and it's not exactly even killing them with kindness. It's the idea that one thing that keeps counter-revolutions going is propaganda. The idea that the other side has committed these great atrocities, and they're just fundamentally evil people. And they're not hardly even people. They're maybe even subhuman, and that justifies anything we do to them. Well, if you treat them as humanely as possible, you don't allow them to harm people, but you give them the food and the shelter and everything they need for their basics of life too. At the very least, they themselves cannot really say that you are what the other side has made you out to be. You know, it's hard for those propagandist ideas to stick, and also through scattering them throughout the community, taking them away from these bad influences that could re-radicalize them to a counter-revolution. It's kind of in a sense, it's kind of like deprogramming from a cult. You know, you want to take them away from this center that sucks them in and keeps them controlled and keeps them pushing to do things that ultimately hurt them and are bad for them in the long run. And you surround them with people that are going to care for them, and eventually the idea is that they just reintegrate with society, and this would be the idea here with counter-revolutionaries. So I think that's pretty cool.
They realize all the places where they were lied to when they're actually experiencing different from what they were told was going to happen. This is one of those moments where actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely. It reminds me, what was his name? There's this great podcast series, and it's all about Rojava. And it's called The Women's War. I'm going to look it up right now and link it in the comments. But basically, for one of the episodes, he went to a prison, and he talked to some of these women, and again, the Rojavans had been fighting against ISIS, so they've taken a lot of they call them ISIS wives. These are women who have been widowed by the war. They were brides of ISIS fighters, maybe taken from other places. I think a few of the people that he talked to were from the Caribbean, and he would talk to them. He's like, how do they treat you? And he would make sure that he was away from anyone that could influence their responses. And they had all these propaganda talking points from ISIS. They still were very much indoctrinated into the ISIS ideal, but they couldn't quite say that they were being treated badly, that the guards were treating them unfairly in these prisons, that they were being deprived of anything, including their religious literature and practices that they wanted. And I don't know, it just seems like, I mean, for one thing, it keeps you honest about your revolution. You're living up to your own principles. You're not just applying them to the people that you like, or you're not committing all these mistakes that revolutions tend to make. Anything we do to them is justified, and anything that is done to us is unjustified. No, they're trying to live their values. So in one thing, it's good for the people that are like guards in these camps, even though they get attacked a lot by these women and their children. They still treat them better than the treatment they're getting back. And I gotta think that over time, it's gonna have an effect on these people. They're gonna be like, well, I mean, what was I really fighting for? What was this ideal life that I was looking for? Obviously, the things that I've been told about the people that captured me are wrong. They are not the monsters that they've been made out to be. So I think there's some on the ground real examples of what Berkman is talking about, that it does seem to be a good strategy.
Right. It's always easier to convince somebody of your humanity if you show it to them and don't just try to tell them, Huh?
Yes, the show don't tell. Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm gonna link the Women's War. This is another one about Rojava. So I linked a very basic Wikipedia article, but here I want to get some more in-depth, on-the-ground reporting from a Westerner. Here's a really great podcast to check out, The Women's War, by Robert Evans. That's his name. Does some really great work.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on. 4 minutes
Surely
left.
they would be safer and more contented than in prison, and presently they would cease to be a danger to the revolution. We have repeatedly seen such examples in Russia, in cases where counter-revolutionists had escaped the Cheka and settled down in some village or city, where, as a result of considerate and decent treatment, they became useful members of the community, often more zealous in behalf of the public welfare than the average citizen, while hundreds of their fellow conspirators, who had not been lucky enough to avoid arrest, were busy in prison with the thoughts of revenge and new plots. Various plans of treating such prisoners of freedom will no doubt be tried by the revolutionary people. But whatever the methods, they will be more satisfactory than the present system of revenge and punishment, the complete failure of which has been demonstrated throughout human existence. Among the new ways that might also be tried would be that of free colonization. The revolution will offer its enemies an opportunity to settle in some part of the country and there establish the form of social life that will best suit them. It is no vain speculation to foresee that it would not be long before most of them would prefer the brotherhood and liberty of the revolutionary community to the reactionary regime of their colony. But even if some did not, nothing would be lost. On the contrary, the revolution would itself be the greatest gainer, spiritually by forsaking methods of revenge and persecution and practicing humanity and magnanimity. Revolutionary self-defense, inspired by such methods, will be the most effective because of the very freedom it will guarantee even to its enemies. Its appeal to the masses and to the world at large will thereby be more irresistible and universal. In its justice and humanity lies the invincible strength of the social revolution. No revolution has yet tried the true way of liberty. None have had sufficient faith in it. Force and suppression, persecution, revenge and terror have characterized all revolutions in the past, and have thereby defeated their original aims. The time has come to try new methods, new ways. The social revolution is to achieve the emancipation of man through liberty. But if we have no faith in the latter, revolution becomes a denial and betrayal of itself. Let us then have the courage of freedom. Let it replace suppression and terror. Let liberty become our faith and our deed, and we shall grow strong therein. Only liberty can make the social revolution effective and wholesome. It alone can pave the way to greater heights and prepare a society where well-being and joy shall be the heritage of all. The day will dawn when man shall, for the first time, have full opportunity to grow and expand in the free and generous sunshine of anarchy.
This has been a production of Audible Anarchist.
All
You can
right.
find more Audible Anarchist on YouTube.
Wow, what an ending. Oh, I really like that. For me, this last chapter has better articulated an answer to something that I've been wondering about for a long time, and that's what do you do with people that just can't get along in society? You might call them lawbreakers, but it's basically people that are violent, or people that hoard stuff from other people that try to control one another, people that are breaking others' liberty, basically. What do you do with them in an anarchist society? Well, here is an example of what you can do. Now, he's using counter-revolutionaries as his example, but there's no reason that couldn't apply to virtually any sort of criminal. You take them out of the circumstances that are pushing them to act in a certain way. You do your best to integrate them into a community of people that will support them, that will nurture them, and hopefully through that care and that camaraderie, they will turn around. I think this would work for a lot of people, because were we to have a revolution tomorrow, it's not as though everyone's going to be on board with anarchism or communism or socialism or any of these other isms. They're probably not even going to have a clear concept of it. Most people in America don't have a clear concept of anything that's actually left. So there's probably going to be a lot of pushback, at least in the beginning. There's going to be pushback if we're trying to build, like even doing like a food not bomb sort of a mutual aid or any sort of mutual aid. There's going to be pushback just because people are like, what the hell is that? That's different. I hate that. I'm afraid of it. I'm opposed to it. But I think taking this sort of kind and empathetic approach is really just a good way to conduct yourselves for anyone who's misbehaving or behaving counter-revolutionarily in any sense of the word.
Well, the thing is, like, going back to the crime factor, most crime is the result of poverty.
Absolutely.
The majority of crime, at least that happens here, has to do with robbery. That literally comes down to people living in poverty and not seeing other avenues for which to gain these materials that they're stealing from other people. Like, are we still going to have other factors to deal with when it comes to other types of crime of, murderers, rapists, etc.? Yeah, we're going to have to figure something out to remove that threat factor,
Right.
of them being a threat to the community. But most criminals are only acting out of poverty, fucking
Right.
straight up. So we would end a lot of that with even having people's material needs met.
Right.
we would prevent more crime. And it's also less expensive to house the homeless than it is to criminalize them and leave them on the street.
Absolutely. That's been shown time and time again in cities that have tried it. They found that, yeah, they spend less in emergency services, less in policing, less in basically everything. And there's a better recovery rate for people that just have a shelter, and then access to resources if they have a substance problem that they need to get a hold of, or mental health issues. Just giving them that access, not even pushing it on them. They found that just giving them access, saying, hey, this is here if you need it. Also, here's a secure room you can sleep in with a bed and some furniture and stuff like
Right.
that. That's the most effective way to get people out of chronic homelessness.
Right? Look at what's happened with the tiny home areas that have popped up all over in the last couple of decades. We see people's lives greatly improving just from that simple facet of shelter being provided, you know? Like that's huge. That's fucking huge. That a lot of people who have been able to make use of those resources now have their health back in so many manners, not just physically but mentally, emotionally, psychologically, the whole works, simply from having provided them shelter, a safe place to exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing, and I mean, it's so simple when it comes down to it.
Mhm.
What's the answer to homelessness? Giving people housing.
Yeah.
What's the answer to hunger? Giving people food. What's the answer to people not being able to get to where they need to go? Free mass transit. What's the answer to people not being able to learn the skills they need to get the sort of career they want? Free education. Like,
Right.
again and again, it's just give people the things they need, and that's the easiest and best solution,
And the cheapest.
and the cheapest. Yeah, yeah, because it all comes back in the end. It doesn't
Yeah.
benefit us to hold the entire half of society back, just for the benefit of the other half. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Got to get
Well,
rid of the walls in front of these things.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, so I came into this book a little bit skeptical. My first impressions of Berkman was that he was a little bit more individualistic in his thinking, but over the course of these chapters here, he's really won me over, and I agree with most of the things that he says. I think he may be um, unrealistic in certain cases, but that's about the worst criticism I can level at. I would say 99% of the things he said over the course of this book is that I don't know that it would actually work out that way most of the time. Um, but yeah, very enjoyable read. And, I'm going to recommend this to other people if they're curious about anarchism.
Absolutely. And you know even putting it in perspective of like how long ago it was that he wrote this, because
Yep.
since then there have been other revolutions like in Cuba that have happened, that where things played out differently and actually would answer some of those questions he was even saying in those last few paragraphs there, um as far as like that question of can you really change someone's perspective by meeting their needs with the revolution. And I think the answer is yes. I think he's correct in that, because look at what's happened in Cuba now. Fast forward 6 or 7 decades since their revolution here, and
Mm-hmm.
you over 90% of their population is in the Communist Party, and that's because they've now been able to see firsthand how beneficial the revolution is to the people.
It's made a material difference in a lot of people's, well, basically everyone's life. There is no more
Mhm.
homelessness. There is no more starvation. There was a wide campaign of land redistribution to the people that actually worked the land. There's universal health care for everybody. By many, many, many metrics, they are far and away more progressive than the United States. Now, maybe again, they don't have as free of speech laws as the United States. Uh, but I mean, yeah, like you said, there's a reason that 90% of the people decide to actually buy into the system. There's a reason they have so much high turnout in their elections, because they have elections that may come to a surprise for a lot of people, but they have democratic elections. You're not allowed to advertise in those elections either. You are prohibited from all the campaign financing bullshit that we do in the West. And yet there's still, like, 90% turnout in every election. They're not being coerced. There's no consequence for if they don't participate. Otherwise, there would be 100% participation also, right? Like, why would that 10% risk their life every time, or risk their well-being every time if there actually was a consequence? So obviously they must think that there's something to this democratic process.
Right. They're seeing that their vote, their voice is actually having an effect. Whereas, can we say that? Fuck no. Fuck no.
Yep. Yeah. No, we cannot. We cannot, because ultimately we have a bourgeois system. We have a system that is set up not for, of, and by the people, but for, of, and by the owners,
The
by
oligarchy.
the capitalist class. So of course, yeah, there's no wonder that we have such a low turnout as well. That people are so disenfranchised and don't feel that they have a meaningful voice, because in a lot of cases they don't. That's not to say in every case. I don't want to discount all of electoralism. I think there's some benefits to it. At the very least, if you put good people in positions, even if they're structurally incapable of accomplishing the things that you want them to, at least it's not someone who's just a blind psychopath, kleptomaniac who's going to steal from the public trust as much as they possibly can. So there's some merit to participating in that, and especially at the local level. I think there's a lot more power at the local level. It is a lot harder to corrupt at the local level because, unless you're in New York City, millionaires and billionaires don't tend to get involved as much in local politics. So you don't have that factor of so much money sloshing around influencing the results.
Then, and when it comes to even like local legislation, I can't talk. That you can actually have an impact there, such as seeing all the states that have managed to legalize or fully decriminalize marijuana in the last couple of decades. I believe we're up to 37 now states that have at least
Wow.
medical, if not medical and recreational for.
Not Minnesota, though.
Get your shit together, Minnesota.
Yeah, what the hell, man?
But we're at least seeing that move in the right direction, and that's because on a local level, you can actually make a difference with passing bills like that to legalize. So
Sure.
that stuff, sure, make your fucking voice heard, but don't fool yourself into thinking that your senator or representative or any other fucking part of higher level state and federal governments don't think for a second they're going to represent you. They don't give a fuck. They're going to represent the millionaires and billionaires that lined their pockets for their fucking campaigns.
Oh yes. That's just how it works. It's basically a legal system of bribery. We just do it out in the open instead of behind closed doors.
Right.
So
they try to legitimize it by calling it lobbying, but it's legalized bribery.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no two ways about it. They may not have a contract where they say, oh, if I give X dollars, you will do X services, but it tends to work out that way. Kind of funny how that ends up lining up so often, that you donate a lot of money and they're more favorable to your industry.
Yes. It's one of those behind closed doors talks.
Yeah.
Situations.
Right.
Yeah. They make those backdoor deals all the fucking time, and they don't give a shit about representing the people back home who voted them into office. They're going to represent whoever is the biggest donor.
Right.
Donor.
Right.
They think they're doing the right thing because they're benefiting themselves and their family. They don't have any concept of benefiting the rest of you because, again, that whole they're psychopaths.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And again, yeah, if you want a society that does not benefit the worst in humanity, then you probably want a different political system than ours, where you can do insider trading, Once you get out of politics, you can go right into the industries that lobbied you for all those years.
Yeah.
You can keep campaign donations in certain circumstances after the campaign is over. So it's just a big money making scheme for a lot of people. Uh, I mean, the financial benefits to being a politician are basically endless. And the accountability is pretty minimal. Basically, just comes up once every few years at the ballot box. And once in a while, if you have a recall election, or you just there's such a big scandal that they are shamed out of office. But that's more of a rarity. Definitely not the rule.
Right. The rule is typically, just look at the job patterns that most of these, higher ups actually have, because I can't remember his fucking name. I think it was Rumsfeld. Um, was already like in the board over one of those mega fucking, military supply companies producing weapons, etc. Goes into government, heading up, you know, uh, one of the offices of the Department of Defense, if I remember right. I don't know. Again, Swiss cheese memory. But he exploited that position to benefit the company that he used to work for. And I believe he went back to work for them as upper management again after leaving government. Just bounced right back to the corporate world. Um, and if you're looking that up, cool, because I'm pretty sure it was Rumsfeld, but I'd have to look it up. But that's
I mean,
one of
they all had so many connections to big business. I mean, there was
yeah,
Cheney with Halliburton.
yes,
Um, there was
the bushes with the oil.
Bush's with the oil, and
Yep.
I think Bush owned the Rangers, the baseball team. Um, yeah, they
Yeah,
came from big money for sure.
it, it's a
They were
huge
all
pattern,
about that.
especially when you get into the nepotism factor affecting families like the Bush. That we've had multiple Bush presidents now, and both of them started out oil industry, then getting their foot in the door with the CIA, and then next thing you know, the motherfucker's president.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Both of them did, thanks to oil oligarch Prescott, who was
Oh,
George the First father.
and
Um,
he
oh,
and
go ahead.
and Junior had the audacity to be like, "Well, this just proves that a C student in college can achieve anything if they put their mind to it." It's like
Like, no, if you put your family's connections to it.
it is despite you being a C student because you had such rich and well-connected family that you achieved what you did.
Yeah,
Oh God,
you won the birth lottery.
yeah,
He was at least a good source of comedy, though.
yeah,
uh,
yeah. Not much more than that, but yeah.
right?
Oh God,
During the Trump years, I was sitting there like, can we just get W's dumbass back? He was at least more entertaining.
yeah.
Not that Trump left doors unopened when it comes to the jokes about that one, but fuck.
All right. Well, I do have to wrap it up here because it is 20 minutes past the time I agreed to stop tonight,
Oh,
and I
goodness.
keep running over my time every night. But I just been enjoying the conversation so much. It's hard to turn it off. So
Right.
uh,
We get some good tangents going.
we
So,
do, we do, and I always appreciate tangents. There's some podcasts and streams that are like, well, we have this agenda, we have to stick to it, and we have to get da 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 done. But I think sometimes you find some of the most interesting things just kind of playing off ideas. Oh, and how does this strand connect to that strand? And like, so yeah, I'm all about the tangents. I don't mind that.
I am too. I like letting the conversation flow where it's going to flow, because
Absolutely.
it usually brings up some pretty good shit.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the last about third of this book here. It's been great having you and having your opinions on, and we will continue on next week with I don't know, maybe should we do like a Mao essay or something like that? What do you think?
That would be nice. Maybe we could start with
Let's do it.
combating liberalism.
Let's yeah, that seems like a good one to start with.
Oh,
I found an audio version of that one, so yeah, tune in next week.
yeah.
Same leftist time, same leftist space for combat liberalism.
Yeah.
But yeah, Trisha is part of the for We Are Many. I can never say that word correctly, but for We Are Many family, If you go to forwearemany.org, you can find out all their stuff. They're also on Facebook. Do you guys have a Twitter presence at all?
Yep. We've
Okay.
got Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Twitch now. Trying to remember what else, and I've just redid our socials slide today too.
Nice.
But
Do you have a link tree, like all your links in one place that you can throw out there or anything for people?
I do not have a link tree. However, I can come back in here in the comments later and actually hit the comments with the links for
Awesome.
everything.
That would be great.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for the shout out. Thank you again for having me on. I'm thoroughly enjoying this. The conversations are just wonderful. I dig it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And once again, everybody, if you like these sorts of conversations, Trisha and my wife Amanda, who was on earlier, are going to be talking about mental health issues and leftism and all kinds of cool, groovy stuff tomorrow night, around about the same time. So 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. So tune in for that same channel. They're doing their head theory takeover. All right, and thank you all in the comments for joining. I do appreciate the contributions you make. Thank you, Natalie, for putting up the forwearemany.org there. I do appreciate that link. And I just, appreciate you guys hanging out with me and Trisha. It makes this a lot more enjoyable to have, an audience to play ideas off of and stuff like that. So, all right. See you guys tomorrow. Have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.